Okay, so I'm a little bit past a week, but here I am. So let's talk about the second installment in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, Spider-Man 2. Hey everybody, and thanks for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. So, leading up to Spider-Man Far From Home, I'm looking back at all the live-action Sony Spider-Man films in preparation for the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming. If you'd like to talk about these movies with me, I welcome you to do so, and I'd love for you to do so. Just comment all your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below, and let's get a fun conversation going. And with all that out of the way, let's move on in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy and talk about Spider-Man 2. So Spider-Man 2 was released in 2004 and brings back the cast of Tobey Maguire, James Franco, Kirsten Dunst, Rosemary Harris, and introducing Alfred Molina as the villain of Doc Ock. Peter Parker has now been Spider-Man for 2 years, and he's having trouble juggling his superhero life with his personal life. When a new villain of Doc Ock enters the scene, and Peter Parker is facing the reality of not being able to control his powers all the time, Spider-Man faces off against his greatest challenge yet. So what I love about Spider-Man 2 is how much it shows the struggle between Peter Parker's personal life and his life as Spider-Man. This movie is constantly beating Peter to the ground. He can't make it to his classes, he can't hold a job, his relationships have strain and they're falling apart because he can't maintain them. And speaking of his relationships, everyone in the cast does a phenomenal job in this movie. This is probably the best work that they do in the entire trilogy. James Franco's character of Harry Osborn has taken up Oscorp from his father, who he believes Spider-Man has killed. He's mad at Peter because Peter keeps taking pictures of Spider-Man, even though he believes that Spider-Man killed his father.
I've been kind of busy.
Taking pictures of your friend?
Could we get off that subject? I want us to be friends, Harry. I want us to trust each other.
And be honest with me. If you knew who he was, would you tell me?
He's got resentment towards Peter, he's got a lot of anger and hurt in him, and James Franco really shows that through the character and through his performance. You also have Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson, who has now taken off in her acting career and modeling career. She's in plays that Peter can't make it to, she's getting frustrated about that. You kind of get throughout the whole movie, and even in the first one a little bit, that Mary Jane knows that Peter Parker likes her. She's just baiting him and trying to get him to say it, and he just won't say it, and she finally gets fed up with it in this movie, and she gets herself a man, which really affects Peter by breaking his heart, and that affects his Spider-Man abilities to be Spider-Man. And talk about Tobey Maguire in this movie, I think Tobey Maguire is his best in this movie out of the whole trilogy as well. You really get the sense of just how hard being Spider-Man is for Peter Parker. He can't get the girl he likes, he's not allowed to have anything that he wants, he has to focus on the crime fighting. And he's all doing this because of the promise that he made to Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. But it gets to the point where it's too tough, and you really see that on Peter. You see how this Spider-Man double life is affecting his real personal life and his relationships. And so when he decides in the movie to give up being Spider-Man because of all the stress, he can't have his powers the way that he wants to, he's not able to control them as well, he throws it all aside, he stops being Spider-Man, and you totally understand why. And then you get the very wacky, very whimsical raindrops keep falling on my head scene with Peter Parker living his best life. It's really goofy, it's really weird, but that's kind of the charm that these Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies have to them that he's done. He does a really great job of having the goofy, cheesy moments that are very reminiscent to the 60s comics, but putting them in a real-life grounded situation, real-life world, and grounded world that he has built. And for the most part, he balances them very well. For the most part. We'll get there. And going on to the villain in this movie, played by Alfred Molina as Dr. Octavius, I really like what they do with Dr. Octavius in this movie. They give him a really great setup. Not only do they give him a relationship and a kind of a mentorship to Peter Parker early in the film, but they also display and demonstrate the kind of man that he is, his relationship with his wife and how in love he is, and his brains and his intelligence that he has. So when he gets these mechanical arms and the experiment goes wrong, and the chip that allows him to control the arm kind of malfunctions and the arms take over him and he kind of goes insane, he kind of gets an insanity. Very similar to Norman Osborn in the first movie. He goes insane and these arms start to control him. You kind of do have a feel for him, you feel bad for him, and there's enough with the character that you know from his past and who he was that kind of breaks your heart when you see him turn into this Dr. Octavius and he becomes Spider-Man's villain. And also, for the most part of this movie, the jump scary kind of aspect and horror aspect that's in Spider-Man, the first one that I talked about, isn't really in this movie that much, but it totally makes up for it because there's one scene where Sam Raimi just goes Evil Dead. He goes nuts with the hospital scene. Everyone has talked about the hospital scene that has talked about this movie with Dr. Octavius taking out the hospital doctors and the nurses. And there's that scene where he's dragging the girl and she's clawing the ground and she's leaving like scratch marks. It's horrific. It's completely shot like a horror movie. It's a horrifying situation for these doctors and nurses, and it works really well in this movie by showing just the power, menace, and evil being that these arms have made Dr. Octavius to be. The movie's also much funnier than the first one. It has a lot more gags, a lot more jokes, and you get a lot more of J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. And J. Jonah Jameson in this movie steals every scene that he's in. He gets even more time than he did in the first one. I love J.K. Simmons' performance in this movie. His one-liners, they're great. It's so fun.
But could you pay me in advance?
You serious? Pay you for what? Standing there?
And he once again just owns this character of J. Jonah Jameson. I also really love the scene where Peter Parker goes into the burning building and he rescues that girl, and he comes out of the building and the fire officer comes over and says, hey, you know, some poor soul got stuck and he didn't make it out. And you kind of see how Peter Parker's like, he is made to be this hero. He has this heroic instinct inside of him, but he can't do it on his own. He needs the Spider-Man. He needs to be Spider-Man in order to do it. So then you get that great speech from Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, and the whole I believe there's a hero in all of us speech, which is brilliantly written and performed by Rosemary Harris as Aunt May. She kills it. It's a great speech. You really see it motivate Peter Parker to come back and try to be Spider-Man again. It leads to the brilliant, I'm back! I'm back! My back! Oh, my back! Scene.
I'm back! I'm back!
My back! Oh, my back!
I love that scene. It's so funny. I remember watching that as a kid and laughing hysterically, rewinding the tape, and just, it's so funny. I love it. It's so great. And also, this movie is about 15 years old, and the special effects in this movie are still holding up really well. In the first Spider-Man movie, it's very much a grounded kind of on-the-ground fighting. It's very street-level fight sequences. This one gets much bigger. You get bank robbery scenes, you get them fighting on top of buildings, along buildings, on the side of buildings, and you get the awesome train sequence with Doc Ock and Spider-Man fighting on the train, which, yeah, the green screen's getting a little bit more noticeable and the effects are getting a little bit more noticeable, but it's still a really riveting and exciting, thrilling action sequences. It's still choreographed very well. I still have a lot of fun with that train sequence, and just the special effects, Spider-Man swinging through the city, you know, it looks great. It still really holds up to this day. I think Spider-Man swinging through the city still has never looked any better than it has in this movie. And the effects in this movie are holding up very well. I don't really have that many negatives with Spider-Man 2. I actually think it's still a very good superhero movie. At the time, it was quoted as the best superhero movie ever made. I don't think it has that title anymore, but it's definitely one of the best superhero movies still to this day. I have a lot of fun with it. I really enjoy it. My only one thing that I don't really like too much about Spider-Man 2 is just how much the loss of his powers is connected to Mary Jane. I understand that that's kind of how it's been with Sam Raimi's movies, is he's really put Peter Parker and Mary Jane kind of can't go one without the other. They're very connected to each other. The Peter Parker and Mary Jane relationship is not one that I'm entirely invested in. I will admit that some of their dialogue and the way that they talk, with all the whispers, does kind of get a little prequely Anakin Padme to me.
I don't like sand.
It's not that bad, but I also don't think it's that good in my opinion. So I'm not that connected to the Mary Jane and Peter Parker romantic romance throughout these movies. And so having the loss of his powers be completely connected and because of his love for Mary Jane doesn't really resonate that much with me. But it's not enough for me to say that it's bad or anything. It's just kind of how I see the situation. But Spider-Man 2 holds up tremendously well. I think it's still a lot of fun, really funny. It has the best performances from this cast as these characters. I think they all do a great job, especially Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker. I think he just really displays the amount of pressure and stress that this life puts on Peter Parker tremendously well. I think this is his best performance as Peter Parker in this trilogy, as well as the rest of the cast. And Spider-Man 2 is still one of, if not my favorite Spider-Man movie. Anyway guys, that's all I have to say about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. But what did you think about Spider-Man 2? Do you think it holds up as well as I do? Comment down below, let me know. I want to know all your thoughts and opinions about this movie. And guys, thanks again for clicking on this video and checking out my channel and joining me for another Spider-Man review. I know I was a little late on it, but I'll be back soon to talk about Spider-Man 3. Hopefully I can get these done before Spider-Man Far From Home. Life gets busy. Once again guys, my name is Zachary Milne. Thank you for talking movies with me, and hope you have yourself a great day.